moving on to like state news and just kind of what's going on, another week, another state legalizing, Connecticut, I think we talked a couple weeks ago, Connecticut was right on the cusp of legalization, but then they delayed. Today, actually, Wednesday, June 16th, the House was debating. I guess the Senate approved, the state Senate approved a bill, got it to the House, but today the House is debating actually the original bill. And I think that means that if they approve the original bill, it's got to go back to the Senate. So the Senate will have to deal with it for a third time before it goes to the governor for signature. There's something about a social equity component that the governor was going to potentially veto what the Senate had come up with unless they did an amendment. Just state politics. I think, people that are, involved in the cannabis industry probably know more about state politics and the nuances of these different states than probably the average citizen. But interesting to see. But it does feel like it's right on the horizon. I mean, it's right there. It's an inevitability. And I think over the next couple of weeks, we'll be talking about Connecticut legalizing.
Yeah, I mean, it's true to New England fashion to kind of be hemming and hawing about how to implement something like this or even to, put it into law. And I just I picture like James Spader from Pretty in Pink, like wearing his like pink polo shirt, like debating about whether or not cannabis should be legal. That's what I picture is going on in Connecticut. And I say that with full love and affection for Connecticut. My brother and sister-in-law are from Connecticut, but it's just, I just can't help but picture this like hilarious
sweater over the shoulders, tied, Boat
definitely
shoes.
Like docksiders,
Right.
Boat shoes, yeah. And but you gotta get it done before you get out to the beach. So you gotta talk through these things. So I don't know. I'm hopeful. I'm laughing because we already have seen the progress in New Jersey and Connecticut, or in New York. So it's just come on, Connecticut, just get it done.
Exactly. I mean, Connecticut was one of the 4, right? I mean, you had Pennsylvania, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, that they all got together and said, okay, if we're going to do this, we should do this together, build a framework that is similar so we don't run into this challenge like Pennsylvania has with residents of Philadelphia driving across to New Jersey to buy alcohol because they have a different structure. So, it is strange that they're so far behind, but maybe it's all the James Spaders there in the House and the Senate that are slowing things down. But I think it's like, it's something like when if this was a couple years ago, we would spend a whole hour on this, right? But it's almost just like a footnote in this day and age. So just good and bad, It's like, oh yeah, they're gonna legalize. It'll come across, and yeah, they did it, But it is funny that it's taking so long. I mean, they have so many different models to look at and so many ways to do it. Everyone's learning from everyone else. Everyone's learning from Colorado and Washington and California and even the new states like New York. So it should be easier, but maybe this is why I'm not in state politics.
Same. Yeah, I mean, Connecticut, it would benefit from it, and I think it would be good for, communities like Bridgeport to be able to drive a little bit more of differentiated commerce to the region, but yeah, hopefully they'll get it done, and it will benefit the people who have some of those very few licenses there. So, and
right.
Some of our investments do. So I'll be very happy when it happens. But
right.
The big ones to me are already in motion. So.
Yeah. Speaking of other states legalizing or, making some changes, maybe legalizing is the wrong term, but Texas, made some relatively modest gains, I would say, with some rules to their medical cannabis program. 2 big changes for them. One, allowing PTSD and cancer patients access to cannabis, which is crazy that they have not been able to access it with the framework. I believe they had chronic pain in that list as well, but unfortunately that got booted, so that's not an eligible condition. And the other big headline is that they upped the limit from 0.5 THC to 1% THC, and like literally 0.5 to 1.0, which is quite low. So this one, on the one hand, there's progress. On the other, is it really progress? To me, this just seems like, if you're a PTSD, there's a patient, someone suffering from PTSD, and cannabis is helpful for you, it feels like you would end up in the black market. I mean, 1% 0.5%, is that really going to change? I mean, I feel like you've just got to consume an insane amount of cannabis to get anything out of it at that ratio. So it seems like you're going to be pushed to the black market. So it doesn't really help, but it is some progress. What do you think about Texas?
Yeah, no, I mean, when I saw those limits, all I was thinking about is I would have to spend all day consuming cannabis if I was trying to take it for medicinal purposes in that way. And it's enormously disappointing because the data around PTSD is here. I mean, Canada leaned heavily in on the PTSD program. It was back when we were original investors in Afria. That was one of the biggest things, is they were inviting the vet community in to talk through their experiences of medicating with cannabis for PTSD, and that it was really the only thing that had helped them, that didn't make them worse in many other ways. So it does make me sad that we're still talking in these crazy terms. And yes, I do think it drives it to the illicit market, because first of all, the expense to procure the amount of cannabis you would need and then to take the time to consume it, it's just impractical. And so having the illicit market still being alive and well and driving it into that place is something that seems definitely very much like what is happening. And because I know that in Texas, I have colleagues in Texas, they're not struggling to access illicit market cannabis. So it's there. They would rather not, but
sure.
Which is always the case with anybody who is interested in this. It's just by necessity. It's the thing I've always said, is that ordinary citizens break the law to procure cannabis in ways that they would never break the law. But it's just because it's so obscene, I think, and we all agree it's just silly at this point. And Texas is an interesting place too, because I mean, it's kind of it's a state that I believe holds near and dear, like a state rights approach and being kind of independent, and, the gun laws that just changed there. I'm surprised it hasn't gotten more of a toehold, but I haven't gotten to understand what the underlying machinations are around that yet. I know what they used to be, which was stigma, which is what it always used to be. But I'm not sure what right now is the thing that's holding it back.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Texas, well, one, it's also when we think about the cannabis industry, it's surrounded by legal markets, right? From New Mexico to Oklahoma, Louisiana, which just this week passed decriminalization for cannabis. So they're making progress there. So for whatever weird reason, it's still kind of behind the times. There's this author, Lawrence Wright, and I remember a few years back, he wrote a book called God Save Texas. He's a Pulitzer Prize winning author, and I believe he's based in Austin, and he wrote, basically the main theme of the book was, like it or not, America's future runs through Texas. Like, it's a representation of future of America. And his opinion, but one of the things he touches on is like dysfunctional political system. And he talks about that, essentially Texas should very much be a blue state. There's an influx of young adults, like technology professionals coming in. We have team members that have moved to Austin, for example, right? And, Austin is kind of a diamond in the rough in a way, and kind of a unique city, certainly, and always has been a unique city. But, you're seeing more of that, not just in Austin, but in places like Dallas and other major metro areas. And then there's also a large Hispanic population, which traditionally, votes blue. Mm-hmm. And they're, almost 50% of the Texas population, but they're just not voting at the same rate. So there's some differences there. And then there's like things like the moderate kind of political system, like moderate Republicans. Like, it's crazy to even think, but like, the George Bushes, were a bit more moderate than what you see today happening. And now, their current governor, Abbott, is, I think in his past life before he was governor, he said his previous job as state attorney, he said that he would go to the office in the morning and wake up and sue Barack Obama and go home, right? That's like the kind of politics that are driving Texas right now. And, in a way, the U.S. political system is kind of getting more and more dysfunctional as well, unfortunately, right? So it's kind of, maybe he's right. Maybe he's onto something. But the silver lining is that there is a group that's trying to go to the people to get things changed. It's called Ground Game Texas, and I believe that cannabis legalization is one of the things that they're working to change, just going directly to the voters instead of letting the legislators drive this stuff. And maybe we will see some progress, when you take it to the voters. That's in California, where you are, that's often a lot of ways that things change, just kind of going straight to the voters. So we will see. But it's some progress, I guess, in Texas, and they can say they have a medical cannabis program, even though it's lacking.
Yeah. I mean, that's what we used to talk about when I was on the board of the Marijuana Policy Project. Rob used to say grassroots, grass tops, trying to get kind of the different levels and access points and mobilizing people. And I feel like he employed that strategy across the states and getting legalization done, and it was pretty effective. But I think and you make good points about the composition of Texas and the voting population. And we know quite a few people have come from the Bay Area where they were very used to having legal cannabis and have moved to Austin. And so can't help but think some of those changes may impact things. So
Right. Yeah, if Joe Rogan's going to have anything to do with it, right, with his recent transition to Austin. Anyways, other states, California made some pretty big headlines. I believe they passed the large budget for the state, and as part of that budget, they're allocating some capital for the cannabis industry. I think over $150 million to consolidate 3 different licensing authorities into one. And I think cannabis licensing has been one of the biggest challenges in California, with things like provisional licensing, and everyone's kind of in this constant state of flux. So that's one nuance. And then they're doing a $100 million grant program to help with this licensing and this transition across a variety of different counties. But I think the county that's going to receive probably the largest share of that will be Los Angeles. That's interesting. Last week, I believe we talked a bit about some of the per capita spend, and Los Angeles surprisingly had some of the lowest per capita spend. And I think it must have a lot to do with access. Whenever we see areas where the per capita is low, consumers aren't buying as much as other markets, it's often because of access. And markets like Ontario in Canada, when they legalized, Ontario is the most populous province in Canada. I think 45% of the Canadian population lives in Ontario. They didn't have any stores open, right? So the per capita spend was low. And I think LA is kind of that same story. To me, what's compelling about this is it shows that a market like, or a state like California is trying to support the industry and trying to support the businesses, when probably it feels like, and I'm not an operator in California, but it probably feels like historically they haven't been. And just created a lot of headwinds, right, for the industry, whether it's, high taxation, whether it's this licensing challenges, there's, a whole host of reasons. So is this a sign that, California is recognizing things and trying to fix things? Is this something we'll see, even more from California, maybe from other markets? What do you think about it?
Yeah. California has been a challenging market. They say there were 54,000 businesses in this market before legalization, before the implementation of Proposition 64 into the market that we have now. So there was never going to be a way this was going to go easily or quickly. Lori Ajax used to say, like, they just didn't have enough people to process all of these license requests and to go and inspect and do. It's a massive state. I mean, we're the 5th largest economy in the world, period, full stop. I mean, huge state. And so it was never going to be easy. I hear the consolidation of bureaucracy into one, and that makes me feel good, because I'm thinking if it's one, then maybe it's better than 3, and then you're eliminating potential things getting lost in translation. Putting $100 million into getting more effort behind this, I think, is great. I think the operators would say it'd be cool if you cut tax revenue from the industry, cut some of the taxes down on the industry. But then when I look at those numbers and I look at how much we paid in tax revenue last year of over $1 billion as an industry into California, $100 million is not, I mean, even if they cut it by like 0.1%, that's barely, it's just not enough to make the cuts worth it for the state. So I'm happy about it substantially, and I do think it's right that they're focusing on LA. It's funny, after last week, I spent time clicking around on that map thinking about where I need to invest more because I was like, oh, San Francisco, we're a pretty fully baked market here in terms of our per capita reach and spend. And so I was looking at LA and I was thinking about the licensing challenges that I know have existed down there. And I think you're hitting it right on the head. It's almost like a limited license market in a way, not because it's just by the way it exists today. So I think that getting more doors open up down there will be a thing that will drive that market forward. I mean, that market is also very driven on delivery. So it's just a different kind of a market. As I always say, California has very distinct markets within this market. But I'm happy to see the state leaning into it. It was something Gavin Newsom certainly ran on supporting this industry. And we have a great connection with Nicole Elliott, who's been a big supporter of the industry. And I know they're very focused on it there. But it's good to see this happening in Sacramento and that the state's taking it seriously as an industry.
Listen to High Rise on all major streaming platforms and watch the visual on YouTube.